Customize your profile. We're going to talk about household funding profiles and how we use them. Before we get started though, please take a moment to review these important presentation disclosure. So why do we do household funding profiles? Well, this is a little different than traditional financial planning where you're trying to establish important goals down the road. I mean, it's the classic deferral of gratification, which is so difficult for people to do. The problem is if it's a goal way down many years out in the future, it's hard to plan for it. And more importantly, it's hard to start working toward that goal. So what we're doing here at the Informed Household is we're really getting to thinking you to get started. And one way we can do that is by getting you thinking in terms of what are your preferences in terms of savings and stuff? How do you want to accumulate wealth? And then what are your spending priorities? And by looking at all this and getting you into a profile, we can better understand your behavior and basically what's going to motivate you to get started on your funding journey. So if you think of your assets as a big tub and everything's intermixed, you have a certain level of wealth that you're trying to build up. And when you're saving, again, you have these preferences on how you want to build that up. It could be through investing in the stock market, could be through, private business endeavors. And then on the other end is how are you drawing down from that? And again, those have to do with priorities. And we're going to help define those in your household's case using these funded profiles. So within our modeling framework for the Informed Household, we have 9 funding profiles. So this is looking at just at the savings side, which is on the vertical side in your preferences and if you preferred more investment-oriented savings approach, or you're using your earnings and taking your excess earnings and saving those, or you're using more guaranteed products like Social Security or private pensions or government bond ladders, those have a form of implicit guarantee. So let's look at the spending side, and this is the horizontal axis, and then This is what happens when you have a mouthful of braces as I'm getting ready for jaw surgery, so please excuse me. So this on the horizontal axis, on the left we have more your essential costs, the next generation is more legacy and education, and then on the right is more your discretionary costs. So what we're going to do is combine those two dimensions to get you your funding profile. So as we help you define what profile, 9 of profiles you're in, we help identify it with a series of icons. So the one in the greens reflects more your saving preferences, and the ones in the red here reflect more your spending priorities. So let's take a look at 2 examples of 2 typical funding profiles. I would say a good number of people probably fall into. The first one is what we call the insanely hopefuls, known, it's risky, but because you're using investing assets, but there's more upside. And this is how we would characterize it. And then the free to choose folks tend to prefer more safer income-based assets. It could be annuities, could be bond ladders, and they tend to they have enough resources that their primary concern is funding discretionary expenses. So with all these profiles and styles and preferences and priorities, there's trade-offs. So in this one, the nice thing with the insanely hopeful is since they're using risky growth assets, they have much more chance for bigger returns and more wealth accumulation, but they also have more downside risks too if something goes wrong in the market. Whereas that's not quite true with the free to choose. They're using more, again, these kind of guaranteed products and stuff, which don't have much on the upside, but they also don't have much on the downside either. So throughout the Informed Household website, you're going to see these icons and stuff identify these various profiles. So for the 2 for the insanely hopeful folks is, the green investing icon and red if you want to see essential expenses. For the free to choose, it's more the what we call the social capital, which is the guaranteed income type stuff, and then the red smiley face is more the preference toward discretionary items that they want to expend on. And so those are the two main components that identify these funding profiles, but there's a third component which is critical, and that is your level of fundedness. And this is basically the whole reason why we created the Informed Household, and that is what we're going to talk about later, is determining, your assets over your liabilities and see if that ratio, known as the funded ratio, is sufficient to cover what you're trying to do. So again, there's always going to be three levels to all of this. Your savings preferences, your spending priorities, and your level of fundedness. So once we know your household's funding profiles, we can also do a risk assessment. And there's additional, a lot of education on the different risk types, but we look at 5 broad categories of risk for every household. And it's earnings volatility, it's the same as sequence risk, inflation risk, but that's increasing prices, longevity risk, living long, and liquidity risk. Do you have enough cash reserves to handle some type of expense shock? So here, just side by side, we're looking at our 2 sample groups, the Insanely Hopefuls and the Free to Choose. And for the Insanely Hopefuls, since they're heavy into the investment assets, their biggest risk is going to be volatility risk. Again, that's primarily sequence of returns risk. And we'll talk more about that on our risk tutorial videos. But for the Free to Choose, it's really more on the liquidity side. So, and then next in line we would say is longevity risk for the Insanely Hopefuls, inflation risk for the Free to Choose, and so on. And again, we're just trying, the risks are there for all the profiles, but we're trying to prioritize them. So if you have a limited amount of resources to focus on, these are where your priorities should be in terms of tackling or mitigating these risk factors. So in summary, what we're trying to do with the funding profiles is identify which spending is important to you. And again, there's no judgment. Everybody has different priorities and stuff. So we got to find what's fine for you. We want to determine how you prefer to save for the future. Again, a lot of this may be driven by what, other people do, people do. There's again no right answer. We're just trying to find out what's appropriate to you. But the check on this is really running your fundedness, so we can find how realistic your, again, spending and saving strategy is to be able to fund your future lifestyle. The Informed Household has a lot of videos, content on the website. We hope you use them. A lot of them are free, available to the general public. Some of them are for our subscribers only. That's what these little symbols are on the Insanely Hopeful risks and the Free to Choose risks, because those are for our subscribers. And these types of how-to videos tend to dive deeper into very specific issues. This is our contact information. If you want to email, call, reach out to us, and just remember, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.